You know the gist by now. This isn't film, this isn't film, and this isn't film. But why does it look like film? Most people think it's as easy as slapping grain over your footage, but it's a lot more complicated than that. There's the stock color, the print color, the halation, the gate weave, and a whole lot more if you're looking for accuracy. All of this comes down to one word: Dehancer. Kind of. Let me explain. Now, if you're more advanced in color grading, you may have heard of this little plugin called Dehancer. For those of you who don't know, Dehancer is arguably the best film emulation program money can buy. And within this review, I'm going to show you how you can use the program to create the most accurate film look for your project. Now, I've been looking to purchase this for some time now, but before I could buy it, Dehancer reached out to me and they asked me to review their product. And they told me I can be completely honest, so I'm not gonna lie to you, I have a few mixed feelings. Overall, I think it's a great program if you know what you're doing. And that's the key phrase: if you know what you're doing. Now, before we get started, I would like to say in the description is a link to Dehancer if you want to go try it out or buy it, and you get a % off if you use my affiliate, Fuji Cinema. Upon receiving the program, when you open it up, you'll see a huge amount of menus that may be overwhelming for some beginners. Now, the first of the menus is the input. For the input, you pretty much go to the source, put in your camera, kind of like how you would do with a color space transform. After you put in your camera, mine's Fuji X-T3 as you can see, you have the ability to change the exposure, the temperature, and the tint. Now, if you scroll down to Film Developer, it's basically where you add contrast and saturation. They call it color boost. The color boost, it's kind of like the color boost in DaVinci Resolve. With these first two menus, you really don't need to touch them unless you're looking to do some touch-ups. But other than that, you can just do whatever you usually do on nodes before this node. Now, for the third node, this is where it gets interesting. Here they have multiple film stocks. This isn't the film print, but these are like the stocks you would shoot on. They're either photo film stocks or motion picture film stocks. And you can look through the list. They have like a few dozen here and it looks great. Then below this, you have the ability to push or pull film, and this changes up how the stock reacts. Now you can even turn this off and you can just use your Rec 709 and then just use the print film, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Now the fourth film tab, called film compression, you see that your highlights are clipping or you see that saturation is clipping. You can use this to keep everything in line, keep everything in check, and just bring everything down to its original value. And it brings like that digital edge off of your film. You don't need to use this all the time, but this is a very helpful tool if you see things are clipping. So the next thing is the expand tab. Now this basically, you have your black points and your white points. If you see your lights are lower than you want it to be, you can just bring the highlights up. And if you see the black points are clipping, you can raise them. If they're not low enough for your taste, you can lower them. And that just creates more contrast. Now, if you're bringing the blacks up, you'll see that it kind of creates that faded film look, which basically means you're not getting any of the black detail back, but it's being clipped and you're just raising it a bit. This is the part that everyone should be excited for. It's the print of the film. Basically, this is the print stock. So this is what films are usually printed on, and this is just like the final process of developing film. So usually where people go is 2383, and that's like the main stock people use in cinema. But you can also go linear, which is just Rec 709, which basically you get just the colors of the original stock. You don't get these teal and orange colors. Then the next one, you got Cineon Film Log. So if you want to use DaVinci's LUTs, you can use that on it. And you can see that sometimes you might want the analog range limiter just in case anything's clipping here. Then you have Kodak 2383. Now Kodak 2383, you've probably heard it on this channel before. If you haven't, go watch my video on how to make the teal and orange look. But basically, this is the Hollywood look. And I actually really love Dehancer's version. It really depends, like the DaVinci one and Dehancer's one are a bit different, but Dehancer almost seems subtler and it seems like you can control it more. But really, they're like pretty much the same look and they both look very accurate and give you that Hollywood look. Then the last one, Kodak Endura Glossy Paper. I had to look this up actually because I didn't know what it was originally, but this is kind of like what they print photos on. So like basically it's like if you took a film photograph and then you wanted to print it out, this is how they would print it out. Now there used to be a Fuji print, but now that is gone, at least on my version. So for now you have to use DaVinci Resolve, but I would like to see that brought back. But I've seen other people who had the Fuji one on here, maybe mine didn't come with it, and it looked really great. Anyway, you can also adjust the exposure here and this works a little bit differently than the original exposure. It's kind of like exposing the image that you've already made. Then you have the contrast. This is the contrast of the stock basically. Then you have the color density, which this is probably one of the most important tools on here. It works similar to how you would saturate. I have a saturation video that shows you how to saturate in a certain way, and it's kind of like a subtractive color saturation, but it's a little bit different, and it works like the highlights don't get subtractive color, but like you can see the shadows, they like really get deep and rich and dark, and it works really amazing. Anyway, next menu, color head. I'm just gonna kind of breeze through this, but basically it's kind of like printer lights, if you know what that is. Basically you're just editing the color of the footage, the tint. It works a little bit different than temperature and tint, but it's basically the same thing. Then you can have control of the warmth and coolness of your shadows, warmth and coolness of your midtones, and the warmth and coolness of your highlights, which is also very important. This isn't really something you would need to buy, but it's just nice to have. Now, film grain. This is like what people think of when they first think of the film look. They think of the grain of the film. To be honest, this actually isn't the most important thing, but if you don't have DaVinci Resolve Pro yet and you don't have the grains there, this is like one of the best grains I've ever worked with because it's actually generative. And what that means is it's generating it each frame. So each frame is different. So even if you go back and forth, it generates a new frame every time, at least to my knowledge. Another thing is they have different presets for 8mm, 16mm, and they also have the different ISO types with that, and the presets work very well. Sometimes it can be too harsh, sometimes it can't be harsh enough, and it really depends because I've noticed in older films it's more harsh, whereas in newer films it's like super less noticeable. So really you have to dial this in by yourself and change the settings. You can even go to custom, and basically how Dehancer describes this is that each of these little halide crystals, which is what these like little grains are, is being generated from the image. So it's actually accurate to the film, at least to my knowledge, and it looks pretty accurate. It looks really good compared to any other film I've used. The grain here is amazing, probably one of the best grains you're ever gonna find. Next we have the halation tab. For this, when you turn it on and off, you'll see that the highlights, they get this like reddish glow, and this is basically what halation is. It has like this little tiny reddish glow that film has, and the reason why this happens in film is because the red layer is like the very last layer, then there's a remjet layer, and a little bit of light passes through and then bounces back. So that bouncing back creates a halation glow around the red layer. So it gives this reddish tint. It also passes to the next layer too, which gives it like an oranger look sometimes, and it's pretty good, especially if you don't have DaVinci's. This is like the second best you're gonna get. And they also have presets for this too. They have the 8mm, the 16mm, the 35, 65, and all of these can be used to create the exact look of film stock that you're trying to create, or to make an accurate film look for yourself. Next, you have bloom. This is kind of an effect that you want to get in camera, but I love that they have it in here too, because it creates this like little glow around the highlights. Unlike halation though, it's not colorized, it doesn't have that color to it, and usually bloom is based on like things you put in front of the camera lens, like they have diffusion filters, and that's really where that bloom comes from. Or if you have older lenses, the bloom can come naturally, but if you don't have that on set and you want to get it on post, you have the option to, and it kind of creates that 80s look where you have those 80s films, the blooms turned up all the way and just bleeding out everywhere, and it kind of looks hazy. That's basically what bloom is. So it's something you don't really need to create the film look, but it's just another addition that is very helpful for creating a certain look. The next one is film damage. Now this is one of the things that I didn't really like about this plugin, to be completely honest with you. I feel like a lot of these are very heavy-handed. Like some of Dehancer's stuff can be heavy-handed, but you can get around that. But with this one, it feels like you can't really get rid of it, because every time I use this, the dirt and the grime on it, the dirt and the specks, there's like just so much that it clogs your footage, and it doesn't really look realistic. For me, I wouldn't go with a generative one for this. I would go for an overlay, because those are more realistic. But with this generative one, even if you turn the film damage all the way down, it's still very, very noticeable. And for me, at least when I'm trying to recreate the film look, I like it to look a little more clean. You can notice in some film, you won't notice any film damage throughout the whole film, and then there might be like one speck here or there from a 2-hour movie. With this one, at least, you can't really go 1 frame or 2 frames without it having some type of film damage. So I feel like if they were to tone this back just a little bit, not even a little bit, but a lot, they could get a really more accurate film damage look. I know Dehancer likes going heavy-handed to create those really old looks, like home video type stuff, but I would also like a more professional film damage rather than like really film damage. Moving on to film breath. Now film breath, another really important thing that I think they go a little heavy-handed on, but it really depends. But with film breath, you can like really tone it back. All you have to do is I put it at like 23 and then bam, it's like perfect. It's super subtle. It's not like in your face. It's good. They have presets for this too. I notice if you go to 8mm and you put it up all the way, it literally looks like flashing and it's green and magenta shifting and it's kind of strange, but it still works. It's just very noticeable and I like it to be more subtle. Next we have gate weave. This I would say is even more important than film grain, because even if you don't have film grain, if a film is shot on film and they clean up all the noise, they clean up all the grain, they will still have gate weave. And gate weave, basically what it is the picture moves ever so slightly and it gives it this livelihood. A great example of this would be the new film The Boy and the Heron. You know it's shot with analog stuff because you can see each frame is moving ever so slightly, which gives it like this lively feel and it makes the animation feel alive. So with this one, I would enable it. Again, they sometimes go heavy-handed. I feel like the 35mm one, just regular, is fine, but when I go to the 8mm one, I feel like I turn it down to like at least 89, if not like 40, because I feel like it is pretty jumpy. So I like to keep it like around 40 or 50 or like 89 at most, or 70 at most. But yeah, other than that, this is like the main thing I would get this plugin for. That and like the film stock LUTs, because it's just so accurate. Going back to the film for a second, Dehancer actually, like I researched this, they say that they look at certain film stocks to recreate these looks. So they're not just getting these things from nowhere. They're actually looking at it, breaking it down, seeing how it looks in real life and in a machine to get these looks. Overscan, if you enable this, you're gonna see that you get these overlays. And basically, you have like these 35mm overlays and you can do like a 4x3 or you can do like 1.85 to like 1. And they have like these really cool like outlines. And I would turn off static gate because I like the jumpy feel. It makes it look more realistic. But the one thing I will say about this is it's not perfect. I notice with like a lot of gates, usually you'll see like dust around them and you'll see like build up and you'll see like each dust particle jitter, and this doesn't really have that. It's just like a cutout and it kind of just wobbles. So it's not perfect, but it still looks really good. If you look at the examples, it still looks great while going through. I would do an overlay or like some sort of more accurate way of doing this, but for this, I think this is great still. Like if you just want a quick and dirty job. But even this, like this adds a lot to your film look. Like it makes it look more real. I suggest just playing around with it because you really need to get a hands-on to like feel how it is. The next one, vignette, that's kind of self-explanatory, gives like a dark circle around it. Monitor, you have false colors so you can see what's too bright, what's too dark, and like basically where everything should be in the image. You can get great skin tones with this by doing it that way, because you can get like the skin tones in the 512 area, where most people would say that's where the skin tones look the best. You basically can see the highlights in monitor with this and basically get like the perfect exposure with this. And I didn't do this in my perfect exposure video, but if I had this tool then, I would use this because it looks so great. The next one is clip indication. You can see all the blacks where it's clipping and all the highlights where it's clipping. The blacks show up blue. I believe the highlights are red. And LUT generator, you can actually generate LUTs with this. So let's say you really like the colors, you really like how it looks, you can export a LUT to get the same look, the same like colors and everything, so that you can put it on to your footage if you really like that color and use it again, or use it for like a project, or if you want to make a LUT so that when you're filming you have that LUT so you know what the footage is going to look like when you color grade it. The options is the quality, normal, fast, high, slow. I would do normal fast for when you're grading and then put it on high and slow for when you're like doing the the final rendition of it or like exporting and stuff. Then you have like the license info and you can like update your license and stuff. That's like the next thing we have to talk about is how much this costs. This costs quite a bit of money, and I would say that's one of the cons of this is it costs $450. And that's a lot of money, and it is pretty steep for this program. Is it worth it? I think yes, for certain individuals. Like I said before, if you know what you're doing, this program will be perfect for you. But if you're just new to color grading, this might be overkill, and you might not be able to use all the tools in here and use them well. Now, I'm going to talk about some pros and some cons about this program. For the pros, I think it's a great program. It's really well made, and everything about it is really detailed, and it feels like a lot of time and effort was put into this program, and I think it's great for people in the intermediate and advanced tab. Another pro is it's very accurate, like the grain and everything. It looks like they did their research. They looked at film stocks, they looked at how the grain and everything interacts, how each color interacts with the environment of the photos being taken. I want to test how accurate this is because recently I shot on 800T, and this program actually has some film 800T as a LUT. So I want to compare the two in a later video. So comment if you want to see that video or not and let me know. But I would really like to see what the differences are between a real life 800T and the program's 800T version. Another pro of this is there's a lot of effects, more than like most people would think. And this helps with the accuracy. Like you have the gate weave, you have the halation, and these are things beginners wouldn't necessarily think of, but like a lot of intermediates and advanced people would be like, oh, I'm going to jump on this. I need these things for my film look. Because if you don't have these things, it's never going to truly look like film. It's going to look like a gimmick. And even with these things, it's very, very, very hard to get the exact film look without shooting on film. But if you have these tools, it looks more accurate, and it's easier to fool someone who doesn't know the difference. Now for some of the cons. Now for the first con, it's a very complex program. Beginners, they're going to have a hard time adjusting to this if they do get this. I wouldn't suggest it for beginners, but hey, if you want it and if you have the money, purchase it. But it's a lot of money for a program. You're gonna have to learn a lot, and even for me, even though I'm like an intermediate to advanced, it still tripped me up a little bit. There were still some things I had to get used to, like adjusting the footage when using different looks, because not every film stock was the same, so you have to really adjust the footage for that film stock, and it was a learning curve for even me. For beginners, this might be too complex. Another con is I think the program may need some tweaks. Like I wish there was a way to drop down all the menus, because when you first open up the program, they're all open. I would like to be able to close all of them at once. That way I can pick and choose which ones I want open at a particular time, because then I can just close everything, find the one I need easiest, then do that specific one. But when they're all open like this, you have to really scroll to find everything, and it just takes more time from a workflow perspective. So if you don't mind having to scroll through all this, it's good, but I'd really like to see them like just kind of make it a little bit more clean, maybe put each category into its own category, like all the film effects like film grain, halation, bloom, put those all into one category and have more drop downs for the drop downs, because I feel like that would make it a little more clean and you would have to scroll a little less. Yeah, and really that's really all the cons that I have about this. Is mainly it's a pretty beefy program and it's not for everyone, but for the people who are really into color grading, who love this stuff, this is probably the best program you're going to find out there. I've searched online for other programs. This really seems to be the one that everyone loves, and that's the most accurate too, and has the most research to back it up, which I think is important. I'm all about science and research, so the fact that they're looking into each film stock and they're able to do this is great. And another con that I have with this is the last and final con. They got rid of the Fuji one. There was a Fuji print and it's gone, and I wish they had it back because it looked so good. Now that I've showed you basically the whole program, I'm gonna tell you really quick how I get my film looks from it. Basically, I just use the presets. Like if I want 8mm, I use the 8mm presets. If I want like 16mm, I use 16mm for all the effects. I kind of went into detail earlier about like what percent I put each one at. I usually lower it because I find it too harsh sometimes, so I just just lower down the settings to make it more subtle. Then on top of this, the film stocks that I usually use are motion picture film stocks, like the ones on Kodak's website. If you just search it up, you'll see 200T, 250D, 500T, all of those. Those I like using a lot. I usually don't do the 2383 unless I'm doing like something really cinematic, because I actually prefer it to look more like the original film stock and look like a 709. Kind of like if you were to scan it and then grade it yourself, which I think looks amazing. I love the look of real tangible film. And if you want to see me go into more depth on how I grade it, I'm going to have a video that's coming up soon that I'm going to link right here. And again, go check out Dehancer with my code in the description below.